I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here I share legal and entertainment news from a psychological perspective. The Matthew Perry case, the arrests that were recently made, and not only his case, but also there was another individual who died under similar circumstances years before him. His case has also been lumped together with Matthew Perry's, and individuals were arrested in connection with those. One person in particular was connected to both of those, but I am appalled by the medical professionals, the allegations against those medical professionals. They are innocent until proven guilty. Their text messages are absolutely horrific. And I wanted to talk about, should an individual with a history of addiction, what are some of the risks with them doing ketamine therapy? And then what are just some of the possible consequences? I am a psychologist. I am not a medical doctor. This is not medical advice. And I'm just talking about this based on publicly available information. Okay. Thank you all so much for joining. So glad to be here. And let's hop right into this press conference. Make this large. All right.
Estrada, I'm the United States Attorney based in Los Angeles. We're here today with our law enforcement partners to announce federal criminal charges related to the death of the actor, Matthew Perry. Following Mr. Perry's death in October of last year, law enforcement, my office, and our partners represented on this stage began an in-depth, wide-ranging investigation. That investigation has revealed a broad, underground criminal network responsible for distributing large quantities of ketamine to Mr. Perry and others. This network included a live-in assistant, various go-betweens, 2 medical doctors, and a major source of drug supply known as, quote, the ketamine queen. We charged 5 defendants in this matter.
And there have been images that have since been released of those individuals. And there's some other coverage that I have that did show the images of 4 of the 5 individuals that have been arrested. And so once we finish this press conference, I'm going to play that news coverage.
These defendants took advantage of Mr. Perry's addiction issues to enrich themselves. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew what they were doing was risking great danger to Mr. Perry, but they did it anyways. In the end, these defendants were more. I'm going to talk about the indictment, the allegations, and the charges in more detail.
So anyone that has, I want to give the trigger warning for substance abuse, for death related to that, and then also just extortion. Like this is really, really triggering. So if anybody needs to step away, please do, because this can also bring up a lot of grief. There is a such thing, because sometimes people loved his character from Friends. People loved him as an actor, as a person. And sometimes when you lose someone, even like a famous person, sometimes there can be this connection. And so it can bring up real feelings of grief within people. And so I just want to give that warning as we're going. I did find a clip of Matthew Perry, his statement that he gave on a podcast saying how he wanted to be remembered. And I'm going to play that as well.
On October 28, 2023, Mr. Perry was found deceased in his home. An autopsy was conducted following his death. That autopsy showed that he had died due to the acute effects of ketamine. Ketamine is a controlled substance. It has some legitimate uses, but it is also used illegally. It is used by people seeking to disassociate from reality.
And that's where we're going to talk a little bit later. Should this have been recommended for an individual that already had a substance history? Should he have been recommended for this type of treatment? And it really sounds like, based on what we know so far, there were medical doctors that were trying to line their own pockets financially, and that really kind of took advantage of his desire for help and his desire to kind of manage anxiety, depression, because he was very open about his history with addiction and his history with mental health.
It can cause serious health effects, serious health problems, including loss of consciousness, including spikes in blood pressure and including respiratory issues that can deprive the brain of oxygen. For that reason, it is a drug that must be administered by medical professionals, and the patient must be monitored closely. That did not occur here. This investigation focused on who supplied the ketamine to Mr. Perry. As many of you know, Mr. Perry struggled with addiction in the past. And on many occasions, he sought help for his addiction issues. The investigation revealed that in the fall of 2023, Mr. Perry fell back into addiction, and these defendants took advantage to profit for themselves. Yeah. The two lead defendants in this case are defendants Salvador Plasencia and defendant Jasmine Sanya. First, I'll talk about defendant Plasencia. Defendant Plasencia was a medical doctor. He worked with another medical doctor, defendant Mark Chavez, to obtain ketamine. He then worked with Mr. Perry's live-in assistant, defendant Kenneth Iwamasa, to distribute that ketamine to Mr. Perry. Over 2 months, from September to October 2023, they distributed approximately 20 vials of ketamine to Mr. Perry in exchange for $55,000 in cash.
And I have heard, so the lawyer you know did coverage of this as well, and I really enjoyed his video. I was going to link it. I wasn't able to link it, but he covers this from a legal perspective. And so if you want a legal breakdown, please check out his video. But with this, it sounds like they charged him an exorbitant amount for the quote unquote treatment, but it likely increased his dependence on the substance. Like that's what it sounds like.
Defendant Plasencia saw this as an opportunity to profit off of Mr. Perry. He wrote in a text message in September 2023, quote, "I wonder how much this moron will pay."
And the lawyer you know mentioned just how this digital evidence. So there is digital evidence that follows these defendants, and medical doctors have a duty to do no harm. That is a part of the Hippocratic Oath. I took biomedical ethics in college. Psychologists and medical doctors have similar ethics, but some things are a little bit different. But doctors have a duty to do no harm. And it sounds, if this is all true, it sounds like this doctor put their own personal finances above patient care, which goes against all ethics and can make it where people struggle to trust doctors. And so that's why I really wanted to talk about this. The emotion that came up, infuriated. I was so mad that there were medical doctors initially involved in this.
He also stated in text messages that he wanted to be Mr. Perry's sole source of supply. He wrote in a text message that he wanted to be Mr. Perry's, quote, go-to for drugs. As a doctor, defendant Plasencia knew full well the danger of what he was doing. In fact, on one occasion, he injected Mr. Perry with ketamine, and he saw Mr. Perry freeze up and his blood pressure spike. Despite that, he left additional vials of ketamine for defendant Iwamasa to administer to Mr. Perry. Of course, defendant Iwamasa had no medical training to speak of.
And Iwamasa is Matthew Perry's personal assistant. And once again, he had no medical training. And when you talked about the Take Care of Maya video, anytime Maya was getting infusions or anything, she was under constant care of a medical provider. The lawyer you know also mentioned that some things that happened with this trial, he was wondering how that might affect the Maya Kowalski John Hopkins case as well. But this is just very, very, very troubling, because it sounds like they were feeding in to his addiction and not doing this because medically this was what was helpful for him.
Defendant Plasencia knew what he was doing was harming Mr. Perry. He had spoken to another patient in mid-October 2023, and he told that patient that Mr. Perry was spiraling out of control with his addiction. Nonetheless, defendant Plasencia continued to offer ketamine to Mr. Perry. Likewise, defendant Sanya, knew what she was doing was harming defendants and also Mr. Perry. She took advantage of Mr. Perry by selling large amounts of ketamine to Mr. Perry over a 2-week period in October of 2023. She sold approximately 50 vials of ketamine for approximately $11,000 in cash. She worked with a broker, defendant Eric Fleming, and also the live-in assistant, defendant Iwo Masa, to distribute this ketamine. Sonia and the broker, defendant Fleming, saw this as an opportunity to profit off of Mr. Perry. In a text message, the broker wrote, quote, "I wouldn't do it if there wasn't a chance of me making some money for doing this."
And that's going to be problematic. If somebody said, I wouldn't do it if it wasn't for the money, to me, that says that they're aware that this is wrong.
Defendant Sonia sold the batch of ketamine that resulted in Mr. Perry's death on October 28th. Officers later searched defendant Sonia's home. During that search, they found what amounted to a drug-selling emporium. They found 80 vials of ketamine, thousands of pills containing methamphetamine, cocaine, bottles of Xanax and other illegally obtained prescription drugs, and drug-selling paraphernalia, including scales and ledgers. As I mentioned, the defendants in this case knew what they were doing was wrong. When they referred to the ketamine, they used coded language. They referred to it using terms such as, quote, Dr. Pepper, or quote, bots, or quote, cans. Also, defendants Placentia and Chavez, as medical doctors, knew full well this was not the proper way to administer ketamine, and they even talked about that in their exchanges. And defendant Sonia also knew that she was doing something that caused great risk to Mr. Perry. In fact, during this investigation, we learned that several years before, in 2019, defendant Sonia had sold ketamine to another customer. That person died the same day. And a family member of that person sent a message to defendant Sonia telling her the cause of death was ketamine. Nonetheless, defendant Sonia continued selling drugs, including the ketamine that ultimately killed Mr. Perry.
And you all know I'm not a lawyer. My understanding of what he's saying, just in general, is she was aware that what she was giving out was harmful, but she did it anyway for the money. And that's where that individual, they're going to say his name in just a moment. She's going to be charged in his death as well. And so this isn't only about Matthew Perry. It's also about getting justice for the other individual too. I have his name down in my description and they're about to say it. Y'all know, anybody that's new to my channel, hello. Anybody that knows my channel, I am really bad with names.
That other victim was a person named Cody McLaury. He died in 2019. As a result of this investigation, we have filed a drug distribution charge related to the death of Mr. McLaury. After Mr. Perry died, these defendants tried to cover up what they've done. On October 28th, after reading news reports of Mr. Perry's death, defendant Sonia wrote a text message to defendant Fleming saying, quote, delete all our messages. Likewise, after Mr. Perry's death, defendant Placentia falsified medical records and notes to try to make it look like what he was doing was legitimate.
And so, and the lawyer, you know, said that could potentially show consciousness of guilt. So going back and sending delete all of our messages. And that's where people need to watch more true crime. Like they have ways to get deleted messages back. Messages stay on servers that are owned by Verizon, by your company, even Snapchat, or like things stay on servers. And if a crime happens, they can get a subpoena to be able to find any, deleted messages and stuff like that. So don't do crimes. Don't do crimes. It makes it easy.
It was not. We have filed numerous federal charges against the 5 defendants. These charges include conspiracy to distribute ketamine, distribution of ketamine resulting in death, maintaining drug-involved premises for that drug-selling emporium the defendant Sonia had, altering and falsifying records related to a federal investigation for those false medical notes and records that defendant Placentia made, and multiple other drug trafficking counts. Of course, the defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty. The penalties these defendants face are very significant. With regard to defendant Placentia, the statutory maximum sentence he faces is 120 years in federal prison. Now, with regard to defendant Sonia, The statutory maximum she faces is life imprisonment. By filing these extensive and serious charges, we are sending a clear message.
Yeah.
If you are in the business of selling dangerous drugs,
yeah.
we will hold you accountable for the deaths that you caused.
Yeah.
This is nothing new for us. Since 2022, my office has filed over 60 cases against drug dealers who've caused the death of another person. These cases are known as death resulting cases. They are labor-intensive cases, and we work with our law enforcement partners, including ones represented here today, to bring those cases. Our office is a national leader in bringing those cases. They're very important because every victim's life counts. If you are in the drug selling business and you're selling dangerous drugs, you are playing roulette with other people's lives.
And I like that they're making it that it's not only because it was Matthew Perry, that if it had been any other person, they still would have done this investigation and followed through. I do think these individuals likely, in my personal opinion, they exploited him because of who he was and what they thought he had and what they thought they could get out of him.
Just like the 5 defendants here did to Mr. Perry. Defendants nowadays are on full notice that the products they sell could result in the death of another person. Therefore, if you're in the drug business, and despite these risks, you continue in the drug business, you are pushed by greed to gamble with other people's lives, be advised, we will hold you accountable. I want to thank our partners in this case, the Los Angeles Police Department, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. These investigators did a phenomenal job digging into the case, looking at every angle to develop a case, a strong case against not only those who killed Mr. Perry, but also Mr. McLaury. I want to note that these cases are important and we'll continue to collaborate with our law enforcement partners to bring them, to ensure that justice is brought to every victim. And finally, let me thank the prosecutors responsible.
So Lisa, you have a really good question. Is it fair to prosecute the dealers? The customers are the ones that seek them out versus the doctors who had a duty to protect their clients. So it's still a crime. So even if the people that are seeking, if somebody's breaking the law, so selling illegal things is illegal. So if you do this, you are doing a crime. And if your crime results in somebody else's not being here, then you will be prosecuted. So I do think it's important for this to happen. I do think it's important because it seems like they didn't care, and that's problematic. I think that's problematic. That's just my own personal thoughts. The text messages are horrific, especially thinking about the fact that medical doctors are sitting here calling him a moron. Like that is beyond me, and that's what made me very, very infuriated. I'm glad that they found all of this, that they were able to recover all of this. Thank you for asking a question. Why would anyone prescribe ketamine for depression to an addict? And that's where, okay, so let's go ahead and take a break from that for just a second, and let's go here. So I have the links to all of these articles down in my description, also links to additional things. There's an individual from the FDA, from the Food and Drug Administration, who is going to go into so there's a different type of ketamine that's administered for depression. It's a nasal spray that's approved by the FDA, and that's different than what he was given. Okay. So friend star Matthew Perry died after taking ketamine. Is it safe for depression? Is it addictive? And so let's scroll down to, and so ketamine is usually used, it can be used for general anesthesia. And let's see. Some people with trauma and depression are using it, and it's called ketamine assisted therapy. And but the dosage is a lot smaller. And so there is the nasal spray called ketamine, so ES ketamine, brand name Spravato, sure. It's a nasal spray that is approved under the supervision of a medical expert. Okay. And that is the only way, the only form that is approved for behavioral health purposes. All right. And so, who qualifies for this type of treatment? Individuals with treatment resistant depression. Now, this is for treatment resistant depression. This isn't the first type of treatment. This isn't the first thing that somebody goes for. There are also other forms of treatment that somebody might try. So, for an individual like Matthew Perry, if I was the therapist, I likely would have recommended transcranial magnetic stimulation. That's called TMS, which is also approved for treatment resistant depression. They basically use these like magnets to order the brain. It's not order, but just to help with the brain functioning. And it's been shown to be effective. There are side effects, so people have to talk with their medical doctors. I've done the psychological evaluation, or for clients that I've referred for that type of treatment, I've been the one that did some of the paperwork for their medical doctor to then decide if it was medically necessary or if it was medically okay. Um, Sometimes there can be some scary side effects, and so that's where they just want to be careful with anything like that. There are potential for negative side effects. It can elevate blood pressure, and which can lead to cardiac arrest. And then um, let's see, is unsupervised use safe? No. It is best for patients to work closely with trusted medical providers. And so that's where often if somebody is getting that type of treatment, it is in the office and they're under the supervision of a medical team. All right. Um, let's see. Okay, the addictive part. Okay. And that's where in the Take Care of Maya case and the Maya Kowalski case, if you know nothing about that case, don't worry about it. But with that case, one expert talked about how it can become psychologically dependent, where a person and they can build a tolerance for it, where the dose that they're given no longer gives them the same effect. And so they kind of end up needing more and more to get a similar effect. And so, based on these health resources, they are saying that there can be an addictive quality. And so, it's really important to pay close attention to whether a person has prior substance use disorders because it can lead to addiction. All right. All right. And so, that is that part. Let's get back. Let me see. Let's make sure that I didn't miss any questions. Welcome to everyone. Welcome to a new member. Thank you. Thank you. All right. And so I hope I answered this question. So why would it be prescribed to an addict? And typically, so I wouldn't have recommended somebody that has a history of significant substance abuse, multiple stints in rehab. I wouldn't have recommended I wouldn't have recommended ketamine. It's become popular, like people have been talking about it, and it is a recreational substance that people can abuse. And so I think it sounds like he found it in a time of relapse. It doesn't sound like it was being used to treat his depression. Excuse me. It sounds like, yes, he was being administered IV ketamine. Okay. All right. Which is not approved for depression. Sorry about that. All right. Let's get back to the press conference.
For the investigation and the prosecution of this case, those are Assistant United States Attorneys Ian Yanello and Xiaohan Tsai. And now I'd like to introduce Chief of Los Angeles Police Department, Dominic Choi.
I liked this.
Good morning, and thank you, Martine. You know, while it's tragedy that brings us all here together, I'm happy to stand here knowing that these dangerous individuals are no longer on the streets and they won't be able to harm anyone else. The Los Angeles Police Department and our partners here today, we're committed to investigating all cases like this, and it's regardless of someone's background or socioeconomic status. And just with all of our cases, this investigation was done impartially. We let the facts drive this investigation, and those facts led us to a group of individuals who were responsible for supplying and distributing to Mr. Perry narcotics that led to his unfortunate and untimely death. The group standing here today, it's a prime example how our partnerships and our collaboration can yield meaningful results. I want to thank LAPD, our robbery homicide division, who is standing in the back there, the U.S. Attorney Martin Estrada and his team, the DEA and her team, as well as the U.S. Postal Special Service and their team for their hard work, diligence, and real patience.
My bad, I was muted. Lisa made a great point. So ketamine is legal, but cannabis is still illegal. So I think it might be. I feel like things that are a formula. I do see it being decriminalized at some point. In my state, recreational use is legal. I have clients that take CBD oil. I also have clients that, especially clients with PTSD that have difficulty sleeping, clients with chronic pain. Because in Virginia you can get a medical card, and so I'm a therapist that is. If a client wants to talk about those options, their doctors are aware of like what they're doing. So I will work with somebody, even like, so I'll work with a client that's using that right there. Because there are some therapists that won't work with clients that use which is okay, but yeah, so I will. So if somebody is using like cannabis or something, um, uh, and it's not excessive, it's not to the point where it's causing problems in their life or anything like that. Making sure if you are looking for a therapist, making sure that the therapist is not going to judge you, or like making sure that they're a safe person. I think that's important. All right, so let's keep going. I think I'm going to skip ahead to her. Okay, it was only a few more minutes. I'll keep it going.
Patience. Now, I know people think this took a long time, but there was a lot of work, a lot of investigative strategies that went into this to make sure that there's a solid case and that we can pursue this in the courts. Our relationship with our federal partners, it helps us ensure that these criminals will have meaningful sentences and be an example for anyone that is willing to risk or jeopardize distributing and supplying unlawful or narcotics to anyone.
All right, so there was another great question by Sleepy Valor. Welcome, welcome. Why are so many famous people addicted to substances? And so fame does not make you happy. And a lot of famous people have their own trauma, have their own life experience, have their own mental health concerns. And so some people think like once I make $1 million or 50 million, or once I'm here, I'll be happy. But that's not what happens. And it's true, you know, the song More Money, More Problems, or Mo Money, Mo Problems. That's true. And so they have the same risk as everybody else, and they might have disposable income where they can afford certain things. And so sometimes there are some substances that can make a person feel like they're performing better. So Matthew Perry was very open in podcasts, I think in his book and in other resources, where he didn't watch Friends because he knew that's the episode. Like he could tell like what substance he was on. And it reminds me of John Mulaney as well. He's been very open about his sobriety. A lot of comedians have like significant trauma because in order to be funny sometimes, like it's not, but like in order to just be able to see the world in that kind of way, they often have experienced things. And so the way that I personally look at uh individuals that fall into addiction, it's often to cope or manage. Opioids are different because one use can make it where it's difficult to stop versus other substances. So I can have a glass of wine and never have a glass of wine again. There are other substances like the one that's injected, and that is highly addictive. And so things like that, one use can create addiction. I think sometimes also in some communities It's like, oh, you have parties and it's just available, it's just there. And so people have to make sure that they have a good team around them. I think that's important. All right, let's keep it going.
Um, and I just really want people to know that that is the message. You cannot get away with this regardless of your background or socioeconomic status. Breaking the law is breaking the law, and you are dangerous and you are jeopardizing lives. So thank you all of my partners for being involved.
I want to say it again. Nothing I've said is medical advice or counseling or nothing. Like, this is just general information. People, I make sure to talk with medical doctors, with providers about any questions people have about individual situations and things.
This and bringing us to where we are at today. And at this time, I'd like to introduce DEA Administrator Ann Milgram.
Yeah.
Good morning. Today we announce charges brought against 5 individuals who together are responsible for the death of Matthew Perry. Each of the defendants played a key role in his death. They falsely prescribed, sold, or injected the ketamine that caused Matthew Perry's tragic death. In the United States, most forms of ketamine are only approved by the Food and Drug Administration for anesthesia. A nasal spray version is approved for treatment of depression, but only in a certified medical setting. Here, Matthew Perry sought treatment for depression and anxiety and went to a local clinic where he became addicted to intravenous ketamine. When clinic doctors refused to increase his dosage, he turned to unscrupulous doctors who saw Perry as a way to make quick money.
Yeah.
Dr. Placencia and Dr. Chavez violated the oath they took to care for their patients. Instead of do no harm, they did harm so that they could make more money. Without performing any medical evaluation or monitoring, they supplied Matthew Perry with large amounts of ketamine in exchange for large sums of money, charging Perry $2,000 for a vial that cost Dr. Chavez approximately $12.
I wasn't sure where I heard the $12 number, but this is where that came from. The actual medication costs $12 and he was charging him $2,000. Like, that's in my opinion, that's a lot.
As Matthew Perry's ketamine addiction grew, he wanted more, and he wanted it faster and cheaper. That is how he ended up buying from street dealers who sold the ketamine that ultimately led to his death. In doing so, he followed the arc that we have tragically seen with many others, whose substance use disorder begins in a doctor's office and ends in the street. Perry turned to a street dealer, Eric Fleming, who sourced his ketamine from a drug trafficker known as the Ketamine Queen, Jasveen Sangha. The ketamine supplied by Sangha would ultimately be the dose that took Matthew Perry's life. Sangha knew that the ketamine she supplied could be deadly, since in 2019, she had sold ketamine to Cody McLaury, who died at the age of 33. But despite this knowledge, she continued to sell ketamine and methamphetamine throughout Los Angeles. Matthew Perry's journey began with unscrupulous doctors who abused their position of trust because they saw him as a payday, and it ended with street dealers who sold him ketamine in unmarked vials. The desperation that led Perry to these individuals was not met with help, as it should have been from the doctors, but instead it was met with exploitation. Exploitation by those who should have guided him toward help. This betrayal of trust is at the heart of this tragedy. Since 2023, DEA has investigated nearly 500 drug poisoning and overdose cases, just like Matthew Perry's. We run a national initiative known as OD Justice, where we work with our state and local law enforcement partners to conduct investigations after someone has passed away. And it is important to note that the national model we today have in every 50 state across the United States is based on the work that started here in Los Angeles. We began this work with our partners in the Los Angeles Police Department and with other local police departments and sheriff's offices in California, in the Los Angeles area, and with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And today it stands as our national model for this critical work. Together, as part of OD Justice, we work to bring justice for the lives that have been lost and to stop others from dying. Regardless of the size or scope of a drug distribution network, the DEA will work nonstop to uncover and disrupt this illegal activity, and in this case, the deadly activity. I want to close by noting that Matthew Perry's death is not just a tragic overdose. After his 2020 book openly discussed his struggles with substance use disorder, Matthew Perry told podcast host Tom Power that he would prefer to be remembered for helping people rather than for his work on Friends as Chandler Bing. And so perhaps what has happened and the tragic details that we are discussing today can help others and save lives. I want to thank the Los Angeles Police Department, the United States Postal Inspection Service, and the United States Attorney's Office in the Central District of California for their tremendous partnership and their outstanding dedication to this case. I also have the privilege of serving every single day with the men and women of the DEA. And today I want to particularly recognize the outstanding work of our Los Angeles Field Division, as well as our diversion investigators who tirelessly worked on this case to bring justice to the victims and the families. Thank you.
I wanted to make sure, because I shared a different link to this on my community tab when I decided to cover this yesterday. And I wanted to make sure to include this quote. And so I do have a link to this short. So CBC News found this quote and shared it in a short. And so it's a very short clip. We're just going to watch this real quick.
To be remembered as somebody who lived well, loved well, was a seeker, and his paramount thing is that he wants to help people. The best thing about me, bar none, is if somebody comes up to me and says, I can't stop drinking, can you help me? I can say yes and follow up and do it. When I die, I don't want friends to be the first thing that's mentioned. I want that to be the first thing that's mentioned. And I'm going to live the rest of my life proving that. I would like to be remembered as somebody.
So I wanted to make sure, since I was able to find that clip, I wanted to make sure to share that this is what he wanted his life to be, one of service and helping people, and especially helping people that are coming out of addiction. And just the idea that what happened to him could also bring justice for, I think it's Cody. I'm so bad with names. I want to say Cody. I am horrific with names. I'm going to look it up because I want to say it. I believe it's Cody McLaury, something like that. I want to do the family justice. I have had some families watch some of my coverage, and so I want to make sure to honor the family. Yes, Cody McLaury. I wanted to make sure because what happened to Matthew Perry ended up also potentially bringing justice for Cody McLaury's family as well. I'm so glad that they sent that message saying, like, this is what resulted in his death. And supposedly the ketamine queen continued to do what she did. All right. So on this next one, this one has some images of the individuals. So I wanted to play through a little bit of this. Full links are always in my description.
Including two California doctors, Mark Chavez and Salvador Plasencia. Yasmin Sangha, an alleged drug trafficker prosecutors say is known as the ketamine queen, and Perry's live-in assistant, Kenneth Iwamasa, who, according to court documents, admitted to investigators he repeatedly injected Perry with doses of the drug that led to the actor's death.
These defendants took advantage of Mr. Perry's addiction issues.
So we watched that part. Both pled not guilty. I'm going to fast forward just a little bit.
Sonia and Plasencia both pled not guilty in their first appearance in federal court. Dr. Plasencia's attorney telling NBC News Perry did pay his client for ketamine treatments.
The full extent of how much was charged and how much was prescribed in the treatment process, I don't have all of those answers right now, but there definitely was a doctor-patient relationship.
In an 18-count indictment, investigators outlined Perry's tragic final weeks, alleging doctors and dealers sold the actor dozens of vials of ketamine for upwards of $60,000. According to the document, Dr. Plasencia sent text messages discussing how much to charge Perry for the drug, writing, "I wonder how much this moron will pay, and let's find out."
Dr. Plasencia and Dr. Chavez violated the oath they took to care for their patients. Instead of do no harm, they did harm so that they could make more money.
Court documents also indicate Perry's assistant told investigators in the days leading up to his death, Iwamasa injected his boss with approximately 6 to 8 ketamine shots per day and found Perry unconscious on at least 2 occasions. On the day Perry died, Iwamasa says he gave 3 separate rounds of the drug to the actor, with Perry telling him, "Shoot me up with a big one." Hours later, Perry was found face down and unresponsive in his jacuzzi. The LA County Medical Examiner determined that the 54-year-old died from the acute effects of ketamine. Perry had been open about his use of the drug to treat depression and anxiety, but federal investigators say that the ring of individuals charged conspired to take advantage of Perry for profit.
We are sending a clear message. If you are in the business of selling dangerous,
and we ended up covering that part earlier. So I'm glad a jury is likely going to get to see all of this, because we know electronic evidence, the jury often puts a lot of weight on that. And if I was on a jury and I saw those messages, yeah, I don't know how you explain that one away, and how you explain away maybe charging, because there are I don't know, like maybe upping it a little, but the amount he was requesting was likely more than was needed to effectively treat depression. Like, this was now a sign of him likely having an issue, and it doesn't seem like they cared. And it is just incredibly heartless. I just can't. So there are 5 individuals that were charged. It sounds like 1 or 2 of them might be cooperative, and I don't know what's going to happen with that. It's definitely one that I will be following. And the live-in assistant, he could have been fired if he had said no. And I don't know if his lawyer will try to bring something like that up, but that's where he should have tried to get him help, and just my own personal thing. And if you do this, you can potentially be found legally responsible, potentially. So I don't know if my boss told me to, if that will be enough for him to not be found legally responsible. So we talk a lot about that. I agree, Red Bunny. He still knew it was dangerous, and he still did it. And so for me, if I was on a jury, I would listen to all of the evidence and all of that. But the fact that he still did it, even after seeing signs that something was wrong, but that's where a defense attorney, I think, would say, but doctors were telling him that it was okay. But and so I feel like he might blame the doctors. I don't know. We'll definitely see what happens. He had 0 medical training, 0. And I still think that that he should be found responsible. He still ended up out of a job because, all right. So I wonder if they thought that he wouldn't, that the end wouldn't end that way, because, and that's where, when he went to the ketamine queen, because that's what happened. He got 50 vials from the ketamine queen, and that's what ultimately resulted in everything. So problematic. Oh, I'll have to look that one up. I can't. So those are 2 different types of substances. So I'm looking it up because I'm not a medical doctor. And let me share my tab. I'm managing my cookie preferences. Like, okay, perfect. Okay, those. Share this tab. All right. It looks like it's something that they've studied. So ketamine is an NMDA receptor antagonist. I'm trying to figure out what in this experimental setting, opioid receptor blockage did not inhibit those reactions. So opioids and ketamine, those are different types of they do different things to the brain. And so it doesn't sound but I'm not a medical doctor. So if you follow a medical doctor that you can ask, yeah. So there is no antidote for ketamine. Okay, good. Perfect. You asked a medical doctor. Yes. So that's what I read from that as well. Um, opioids are a completely different type of medication and what they do to the brain, because they actually they can slow everything down when everything is too high, but it's in a different way than that general anesthesia. Okay. I hope that is helpful. I am so glad that I was able to do this with you all today. Tomorrow, I will be going live at 1:30 p.m. to talk about the Mr. Beast drama, but from a psychological perspective. And as a mom, with the conversation that I had with my child after hearing some of this and talking about safety and Discord servers and all of that, my child doesn't have access to Discord. He's only 6. He just turned 7. He's only 7 years old. But for individuals that are, my brain, what I want to say. Oh, and then I'll also be talking about the Susan Laurenitz. Y'all know me in names. The case out of, is that Florida? I'm pretty sure that one's in Florida. So I'm covering that case. We're currently on jury watch for that one. Let me search if what's happening. Pretty sure we're just waiting for the jury. Yeah, I think we're still just waiting. They were doing closing arguments today, and then they were going to release the jury. Yeah, so looks like they might have done closing arguments. So I will be covering that one tomorrow. We might have a verdict by tomorrow. Yes, the one that unalived her neighbor through the door. There are aspects of racism and things that did not come into the trial, but that I will definitely discuss. Just based on some of the allegations and things that she allegedly did and said. There was also an expert that talked about the amygdala. And so we should be on that conversation maybe about 2 p.m. I don't expect the Mr. Beast thing to be long. So I think by about 2 p.m., I think we'll be able to be on the second case for tomorrow. So we'll be doing both of those tomorrow. I hope that is helpful. And then just an update with the Sarah Boone case. So I did look up. So Sarah Boone was requesting a neuropsychological evaluation to look at the effects of trauma. She's alleging an experience of experiencing lifelong emotional and physical harm. And if she does bring that expert in, I'm not sure she fully gets that that they will so the prosecution will be able to ask that individual about alcohol, I think. Because she's over here saying, well, it's all my trauma, but also, what about the effects of alcohol in memory? What about the effects of alcohol on behavior? Those are the questions I would have. So tomorrow is 1:30 p.m. Eastern, and then about 2 p.m. Eastern. So once I finish the Mr. Beast thing, gonna divert right over into the Susan case. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your weekend and the rest of your Friday, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Bye.